Hello, I'm going to go over a component of the trials team that I've been wanting to try to put together someday. This is the main tank component, so there will be several other videos that will essentially combine together to make an optimal veteran to hard mode trials team. This is my Dragonkight main tank build for trials. I'm going to go over a couple of things on how to build a tank for content. For the champion points section, for the blue tree, the essential slottables are going to be Ironclad, Duelist Rebuff, Enduring Resolve, and Unassailable. Now, depending on your race, you may or may not need to slot Bulwark instead of one of these, and in that case you would want to swap out Unassailable for Bulwark, or if you have a fight that includes area of effect damage but not as much damage over time, you can slot Bulwark in place of Enduring Resolve, and that will consist of your blue tree. Your red tree, these two slottables up here you always want to have in place for maximum health and for armor. Then I like to use Bastion to include higher shields. And then over here on the right, if you're main tanking, you're not moving around a whole lot, then Bracing Anchor is what you want to slot as well. That will give you 20% more block mitigation. Now let's take a look at the character sheet to make sure where we're at, but first I'm going to buff up with Major and Minor Resolve. You can see this build is exactly at the resistance cap at 33,000. Ideally, you want to be at about 40,000 health or more. If you're just starting out with vet trials, you probably want to stack more into maximum health. So how I normally build this is I put my gear on, get all my skill points in passives slotted, and then I work on my attributes to make sure where I'm sitting is correct. Because you want to be at 40,000 health and then distribute the rest of your attributes to have at least 15,000 magicka, and put whatever you have left after those two things are handled into stamina so you have enough blocking. These two components you don't really want to concern yourself with building into too much, because when you block, your stamina goes to 0, and healing and your self heals are what you're going to rely on more than health recovery. You want to stack into mag recovery as much as you can, and I'll explain that as well here in a second. Your Mundus that you want to use as a tank is an Atronach. It's the absolute best Mundus for a tank. And so, depending on what class you're using, your gear pieces are going to be a certain trait. For a Dragonkight, it's a lot easier to get to the resistance cap because they have a passive that gives them physical and spell resistance right here, the scaled armor. So they have an additional boost in their physical and spell resistance that they don't have to stack as much into for the resistance for. So you can change out some gear sets that, or I should say trait sets that would otherwise be resistant, reinforced, and you can use divines instead to get more mag recovery. For jewelry, I recommend infused with magical spell cost reduction glyphs. And the reason why is because this will reduce the cost of your spells. If people are running the mag recovery glyphs in its place, recovery glyphs only tick every 2 seconds. So you can only get a certain amount of recoveries from actual recoveries. Whereas if you're popping spells every second, this mathematically works better in terms of being more efficient on your resources. So I have Divine's gear on all of my armor pieces, except for the chest piece I always have reinforced. Then I have prismatic glyphs on all the armor glyphs. On the back bar, it's always an infused crusher to make sure that we're stripping armor from the enemies. The shield is again Divine's with a triglyph. And then I have a defending sword with a hardening glyph to make sure that I am up to the resistance cap on my front bar. And the two sets I am wearing, 5-piece wise, it's the Perfected Lucent Echo set, which has a line of healing taken, minor Aegis, and then 2 lines of max health. And then the 5th bonus of giving the group 11% crit damage while I'm above 50% health. And it gives me damage mitigation. If I happen to take a lot of damage, I can get back up to full easier. The second set that I'm currently trying out, because of placement of other sets in the group, is the Glacial Guardian set. This comes from Coral Airy. I've not seen very many people use this set, but I wanted to try it out because this increases the status effect chance taken by an enemy. So I thought that was a good buff to try and use. On this main tank I have Nazaray, which extends all major and minor debuffs depending on how many ultimate you use. And then on my front bar I have the Perfected Puncturing Remedy set, which will heal you every time you use the puncture skill. So now I'll go over my skills. On my front bar I have the Scribed ability of the Magicka Chains. This pulls enemies in and taunts them unless they have already been taunted. It gives me recoveries back of 600 Magicka and 600 stamina. And it also applies major cowardice to the enemy that it hits for 10 seconds. Then I have my Pierce Armor taunt that applies major and minor breach. Then I have the Ingenious Shields. And a lot of people like to run the scribing version of a shield. This is important because this skill comes from the Earthen Heart ability. So this does 2 things for your group. It will add a shield of 4,005, as it says there. It also gives me major mending for 3 seconds. And then it also does 2 things passively. It procs minor brutality, increasing your group's damage by 10% for 20 seconds. And then it also procs the Helping Hand set, passive, that gives you stamina back. So what you can do is you can drain your stamina by holding block and casting a stamina skill. And then you can cast the Magicka skill, and you can watch how much while you're holding your stamina goes back up. This makes the Dragon Knights a very easy class to use because they have extremely good sustain. Now my 4th skill on my front bar I have set up as a Chilling Throw. I know there's a lot of people that use this as their taunt. The reason I don't have that set up is because it changes this skill to a stamina skill when you change it to a taunt. And it actually costs more stamina than this poke here. And so I wanted to have mostly Magicka skills on my bar because I have Magicka reduction jewelry glyphs. So this does frost damage. It also, I have this currently set up with Fencer's Parry, which I'm considering changing that component to an actual heal. And then The bottom part is extremely important. This applies Major Maim for 10 seconds. That's huge because it's not been available in a 10-second debuff before so widely. Now you can put this on any class and it's available for 10 seconds. This last skill, Defensive Stance, is the morph of Defensive Posture. It's in the Sword and Board line. This is your defensive skill that you don't ever have to use unless you need the extra shield that's there. It does cost stamina if you do use it, but the reason we have this slotted on the bar is because it will reduce your block cost and it increases the amount of damage that you can block by 10% for each of those categories. Then I have Reviving Barrier, and this is slotted on my front bar to take advantage of the Magical Aid passive that gives me 10% more Magicka recovery. So now let's go over my back bar. My back bar is Hardened Armor. This is your source of major resolve on the build. It also gives you a fairly large damage shield for 6 seconds. And it does flame damage to enemies that hit you with direct damage. Here is another scribed skill that I have on my setup. This was built within the idea of getting rid of Resolving Vigor that costs stamina. This setup gives us a burst heal with a small heal over time and provides the same buff that Resolving Vigor does for the same amount of time. However, this now costs Magicka instead of stamina. Then we have the Frost Clinch Destruction Staff Range Taunt. Blockade of Frost. This will apply Minor Breach to anybody that is being chilled. This will also proc our back bar Crusher enchant 100% of the time. And then I have a Burst Heal on the back bar. And then I also have Magma Shell on for defense. Now you may be asking, why do I not have Warhorn here? The team that I have composed runs at 100% crit cap at all times. So Warhorn to get the major force buff is not needed. So I've gone over the skills, I've gone over the gear, and I have gone over why I have this set up. So I will add up more videos here to cover the rest of the positions on the team.